More light, maybe?
Yeah. Not that way.
Okay.
No, that's
Is
better.
that okay?
Hey, wow, that's really good. Yeah, so I'd like to also thank you all for coming out tonight, considering the weather or the possibility of weather or lack thereof. It is a bit cold, but hopefully it'll be worth it. And I'm going to try to keep this short, obviously, since we do seem to have a bit of a time crunch.
You could delay.
Should work. So again, my name is John Black. There be dragons. I am a master naturalist for the state of New Jersey. Dragonflies, insects in general, but dragonflies in particular have always been a fascination for me. I actually built a pond at the house just so that I could attract dragonflies. And I've spent many hours sitting by the pond, just studying and watching and photographing and just marveling at these creatures. So hopefully, by the time I'm finished, you'll understand why they're so fascinating. Dragonflies have been around for a long time, about 300 million years. They were here before the dinosaurs. About the only insects that preceded them were beetles, and the very first insect was actually, it's a springtail, and they're still in existence today. But dragonflies have been around, I forgot something.
No, you.
Yep. The difference is, back then they were a little bit bigger. I forgot the big dragonfly. Yeah, that's a bad on my part. All right, so dragonflies were bigger. Now, the largest dragonfly that we'll have in this area is a common green darner. It has a wingspan of about 3 inches. The prehistoric dinosaurs, or dinosaurs, dragonflies, they had a wingspan of 3 feet. So imagine a dragonfly was about this size. Much, much larger back then. Yeah, it's a little bit smaller than that, but that gives you an idea of how large they were. There are a number of environmental, or not environmental, but evolutionary things that cause them to get smaller. Part of it is competition. Part of it is predation by other creatures. When they were flying, they were the only things flying. Well, when flying dinosaurs came about, flying birds started to eat them. The dragonflies that we have now, they're pretty nimble. They move around. But if you have a wingspan of 3 feet, that's a little bit different story. You're not going to be as quick. And so that's part of the reason. Another reason, I'm going to ask a question. Why do you think that insects, because everything back then, the plants were larger, the insects were larger, why do you think they would be so much bigger back then as opposed to now?
Probably the temperature of the earth.
Well, we're getting warmer now, but the insects aren't getting bigger.
Well, it's just short. We're talking about short term. It went back then, it was long term.
Right.
There was more to eat.
No, because everything, the food is not really what caused it. They actually did a study. We know for a fact now. It was hypothesized before, but we actually know why now. The reason why had to do with the oxygen content.
Oh.
Right now, we're about 14%, I believe, oxygen. Back then, it was closer to 22 and higher. And so because there was more available oxygen, one of the largest organ in any insect's body is a tracheal tube. It's the equivalent of lungs. With more oxygen in the atmosphere, their lungs are more effective. If they're more effective, then it can support a larger mass. And we know this for a fact because they actually did a study where they raised insects from egg several generations in an oxygen-rich environment equivalent to what had been when these guys were flying around. And what they found out is with each subsequent generation, the insects grew by about 15%. So we know that if they were to keep doing that, there would be a 3-foot dragonfly flying around eating your cat. Dragonflies in other cultures. I've been fascinated with dragonflies. Part of it may be because of my heritage. I am part Native American. I am part Japanese. So in my cultures, all of my ancient ancestors revered dragonflies. There are petroglyphs carved into rocks, similar to the one before and this one, in the desert Southwest. We know that the Sioux tribe, which stretched pretty much all the way up to Canada, from the Midwest of the United States up into Canada, they were the dragonfly to them was a sacred insect, as sacred as the white buffalo is. They would paint the dragonfly on their teepees. The warriors would paint them on themselves. They were very important, and the reason why is that they believed that the dragonfly was sent by the Creator. Can I have my tea? And that it was spirits of their ancestors, which is kind of interesting because the Japanese and many Asian cultures believe the same thing. Which brings us to an ancient painting from Japan, excuse me. The Japanese were so enamored with the dragonfly, probably because from the very first emperor of Japan, Emperor Jimmu, he renamed the Japanese islands to Akitsushima. To him, looking out over the islands, it looked like two dragonflies mating. And so he renamed them. The literal translation is Dragonfly Isles. The symbol shows up in many of the family crests. So before I go into the life cycle, let's contrast the societies or the groups of people or the cultures that actually like dragonflies to some of the cultures that didn't like dragonflies. The German cultures considered the dragonfly to be essentially Satan's messenger. They would believe that if a dragonfly was flying around your head, it was weighting your soul, so that you couldn't get into heaven. Some of the African cultures believed that if your toes were sticking out from underneath your blanket, that a dragonfly would come and sew your toes together. So it's interesting that there is such a contrasting difference. They were called water witches. They believed, some of the European cultures believed that a witch would come and in order to get around would turn herself into a dragonfly or himself into a dragonfly so that they can get around. Or that Satan would turn a horse into a dragonfly so that just a difference between one culture and another. One culture or group of cultures revered the dragonfly, whereas another group of cultures did not. So, life cycle. As with all things alive, we start with a pair mating. This is a male blue dasher grasping a female blue dasher, obviously, using his cerci behind her neck. That's how they attach themselves. All dragonflies will do the same thing. What they do after this is slightly different. But in general, if you see two dragonflies like that, that's what they're doing. Another view from the side. Apparently it doesn't hurt. Now this is, in the blue dasher in several species, what happens next. We have a male blue dasher here, You can see that he's still holding on to the female. Now she has grasped on to his abdomen, and his reproductive organs are actually up in here. Her egg laying, her ovipositor, is in this section of her abdomen, and she is going to attach it to the male there. The first thing that the male does is that he has an appendage that comes out that scrapes out all of the other sperm. Anything that may be in there from any other male dragonfly, he is getting rid of it because he wants only his DNA to be passed on. So that'll be the first thing. Oh, I should show you this. This dragonfly here that is coming in, you'll see another picture of him later. What is going on here is he wanted to scare this one away. There's always we know from nature that there's always a male that wants to be in charge. Dragonflies have territories, they will do the same thing. So there's a better view of what is going on. You can see that she's still holding on. She is getting ready to fly off. The next thing that she will do is that she'll deposit her eggs. Generally, the blue dasher in particular, but most of the dragonflies, they like to put their egg in or on vegetation. There are some that actually will take the female on her cerces is very sharp, and she can slice into a plant and deposit the egg inside of a hollow-stemmed plant. Most aquatic plants are. The egg will travel down, and the larva will start to grow from there, and then basically bust out. It's to protect the egg. In the case of the blue dasher and several other dragonflies, they will just lay their egg near a plant. We're not really sure why. It doesn't really attach to a plant. It can. They will just deposit them straight into the water. I've watched them fly and just drop an egg in the water.
How soon after mating does that happen?
I'm sorry?
How soon after mating?
Immediately.
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 Interesting.
The green darner, the common green darner, which is one of the largest ones, they will actually continue to hold the female and fly around and dunk her and stay with the female. As well as the male that you're not seeing here, the male dragonfly is flying a patrol to make sure that no other, because if another male dragonfly comes and grabs her while she's doing this, his appendage will just reach in, scrape out all of the other sperm, deposit his own, and then she will go off and lay eggs.
How does she cut, you said, with her?
Cerces, if you notice on the back of a dragonfly, they look kind of like a pair of hooks, really, and they're sharp enough to cut into the plant.
Where is it?
It is on, let's see if,
Interesting.
it is right there.
Oh, okay.
Now, the blue dasher, the female blue dasher does not have that. Okay, all of the male dragonflies have the cerci because that's part of their reproductive system. That they're graspers, really. Much like a spider, if you notice a spider, it has these kind of, looks like hands in the very front of its face. Those are for reproduction, not for the same reason, but it's what they use them for. Did you have another?
Do they cycle?
I'm sorry?
Do they cycle, or are they always?
The female can lay about 400 eggs, and then she's
How
done.
often do they mate?
It depends on it depends on the male population. She will lay all of her eggs. She doesn't care. They are not selective. Whatever male is dominant enough to essentially grab a hold of her, has the ability to mate. Now the males do have this kind of aerial ballet, where they try to say, oh, well, I'm dominant, I'm dominant, I'm dominant, and they'll try to chase off the other suitors, as it were. But there's no guarantee that that's what happened. So there's no, a male dragonfly isn't going to be able to chase off all of the other male dragonflies in order to be the only one that mates with a female. So there is a cycle, yes, she has only so many eggs, about 400, which is, quite a few. And that's what a blue dasher egg looks like. That is about the size of the head of a pin. All right, now she will not lay all 400 eggs at once.
I was gonna say, can she breed more than once?
Yes, yes.
Interesting.
If the area that she's in doesn't have enough suitable plant life, or she is just not happy with the area, for whatever reason, we still don't understand that. She'll just lay whatever eggs that she feels it will be viable. And that's something else too. Let me back up a little bit. We used to believe that if a dragonfly was in a particular body of water, that water was clean. Clean meaning that it wasn't polluted, that it was safe water. And that is partly where some of the Native American reverence for them came from. However, we now know that that's not necessarily true. And I believe that it is more that the dragonflies have adapted to the water conditions that we have more than it was ever okay. So dragonflies in water generally will indicate that that body of water is clean, but not necessarily.
What's the ratio of male to female?
It's
1-1.
It varies. It really does vary. They are essentially, they're 50-50. There's not more one versus the other.
But all the females aren't fertile at the same time.
Not necessarily. They have flights, a period of time that they're alive. Dragonflies don't live that long as an adult. We'll get it into the nymph stage in a second here. So their flying season may only be a couple of weeks long. And so their sole purpose at that point is lay as many eggs as possible. So how many people did not know that dragonflies started off as an aquatic insect? Everybody did? No? Okay. Dragonflies start off as aquatic insects. Pretty amazing aquatic insects, actually. This is the nymph stage of a blue dasher, obviously. They propel themselves to the water by a very unique method. Their gills are inside their body. They take water in through the front, through their mouth, and they shoot it out their butt.
That's great.
So they fly through the water. Water comes in through here. Their abdomen expands out to suck it in. And then their abdomen compresses, which shoots the water past their gills and out through literally their butt. They're very quick. They have a very unique mouth. The mouth is in two halves, essentially like this. Only what they do is they shoot their jaw out, open it up, grab whatever it is that they want to eat, pull it back, and put it into their mouth. They do that in about 25 milliseconds. That's pretty fast. A nymph can eat its own body weight in other insects or fish or whatever in about 30 minutes. Try to imagine, well, I'm sure everybody pretty much knows how much you weigh, all right? Try to imagine eating that much food in half an hour. 30 minutes. Go. Just a few minutes here. So this jaw, this mouth part here, is pretty amazing. It moves really, really fast. It was the inspiration for the movie, the monster, the creature in Alien. If you all remember, its mouth opened up and had another mouth that came out, grabbed stuff. That's where it came from. This is the exuviae. When a A dragonfly is essentially a molting. When a dragonfly emerges or comes out of the water, it's an incomplete metamorphosis as opposed to butterflies that go through a complete metamorphosis. They go from the larval stage straight into adult. There's no pupa stage. This is what they leave behind. This is the exuviae of a common green darner. It's pretty big. It's about 2 inches long. This is another picture of one that is coming out of the water. So they spend their childhood, as it were, as an aquatic insect. As an adult, they can live a couple of weeks, couple of months. As an aquatic insect, they can live in the water for about 2 years, if necessary. It all depends on the environmental conditions. Right now, in the ponds, in the lakes, in the streams, there are dragonflies, nymphs, living in there. As long as the water doesn't completely freeze solid straight down to the bottom, they'll survive. And there's always something for them to eat. What do they eat? Water fleas, predaceous diving beetle, helgramite, mayfly, stonefly, caddisfly, hydra, scud, bladder snail, frog, tadpoles, and our favorite, mosquitoes. If you have a dragonfly, if you have a pond, and you have a problem with mosquitoes, if there is any way that you can encourage a dragonfly to lay an egg in there, you will no longer have mosquitoes. They will eat every single mosquito larva in that water and not stop until they're all gone. So, some of the facts about the larva. They can live as a few days to up to a few years depending upon the species. Depending upon the species and the conditions. Eat its own body weight in about 30 minutes, grab its prey 25 milliseconds, and I told you about the jaw. What is the farthest migrating insect? Monarch butterfly goes a long way. Goes about 3,000 miles, 5,000 miles, depending upon how far in Canada it comes from. Dragonfly, wandering glider dragonfly, has a round trip migration of 11,000 miles.
I didn't think they lived long enough to.
Well, that's where this first statement is. The larva, when with the wandering glider, and that dragonfly is about 1.5 inches, 2 inches long. It's a medium-sized dragonfly. They follow the monsoon rains from India to Africa and then back. Okay? So what they'll do is these vernal pools that are left from the rains, they'll lay an egg. In a few days, a dragonfly will come out of that pond because that pool of water will not stay there that long, right? Then that dragonfly will continue the migration. So it's not a one-way trip, except for several thousand miles over open water. And it coincides, their migration coincides with the migration of 3 bird species. You can imagine what they're eating on their flight. So after it comes out of the water in as an aquatic insect and it goes straight into being an adult, this is what happens. The nymph will crawl out, generally will look for, will know where the sun comes up. They'll do this in the middle of the night. I know this for a fact because I took these pictures starting at about 2 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, and it takes a long time. It's not instantaneous. Believe me, this isn't bam, it comes out. It's, oh my gosh. So, the first thing that it'll do is that it will, the top of their exoskeleton as an aquatic insect has a weak spot. And it does a backflip. It pushes backward till it pops through. Does this kind of backward somersault. These white things here are what were the gills inside of the nymph. They obviously no longer need them because they're going to be an air-breathing insect, And so those are left behind. Another view, you can see just like with the pupa stage of a butterfly, the abdomen is really filled with fluid. It's really big. You can see the wing buds right here.
Small.
Okay, they are very small. Once it comes out completely, just like with a butterfly and all other winged insects for that matter, they take this excess fluid that is inside their abdomen and they pump it into these very thin tubes inside the wings. Okay? By doing that, what that does is it causes the membrane and everything to stretch out. And they leave it that way until those become fairly dry. They become rigid. Then they take that fluid and they pump it back into their bodies. It seems like a lot of work, but the structural integrity of a tube, it's a very rigid, for its weight, it's a very rigid structure. Dragonfly's wings, we're going to get into this in a minute. Dragonfly wings are amazingly strong. Birds, their bones are hollow. Their bones are hollow for a reason. You know, it gives them rigidity without the weight. Dragonfly wings, all insect wings are the same way. Dragonfly wings are really amazing because this structure of these wings, these veins are not, they're not random. The wing has a shape to it, and that shape can change, and that the stiffness across the wing varies. Another picture of some emerging. And at night, can't they do this during the day? The reason why they do this at night is that they're extremely vulnerable. They have absolutely no defenses whatsoever. They do it so that when they put their wings out, as the sun comes up, it's going to be hitting their bodies. It's going to be helping to dry out those wings. At this point, you notice that his color is kind of a little off. It's not quite right. This is technically the adolescent stage of a dragonfly. They are not sexually mature. They're called teneral. Their colors are not quite there. They're not very good hunters. They're not very good flyers. But if you think about it, they just left an aquatic environment straight into an aerial environment. So there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve. This is what's known as a mass emergence. Well, several will come out at one time. This is not uncommon. It is actually kind of normal for the beginning of the season. If you'll notice, if you ever go out on a trail and go out on a trail this spring, you'll go out one day and there won't be any dragonflies. You go out the next day and there's nothing but dragonflies. Well, that's because all of those dragonflies came out that morning. There's a mass emergence. And this is my pond. Had roughly 50 dragonflies emerge in one day, and then a few days later, same thing happened again. Came out with quite a few a year. You see the dragonfly? Another reason why, when they first emerge, that their colors are not very vibrant. It helps them with camouflage. This is a female common whitetail that had eclosed or emerged that morning. She's right there. They're pretty good camouflage. I'm not going to go through this. Dragonflies have names. Petal tails, darners, club tails, spike tails, cruisers, emeralds, skimmers, dashers. Those names are based on or come from the shape of their body. It's pretty much all you need. If you want a copy of this, I have a printout of it with me. So, dragonflies are pretty amazing aerial predators. They fly forwards, backwards, upside down, sideways, hover, spin around. Plus, they are, some people believe that they are the fastest, maybe the second fastest. Bottom line is they fly about 35 miles an hour. It's pretty quick for, and that's not dive bombing, that is flying steady straight across 35 miles an hour. The only other insect that might be faster is a hawk moth, roughly about the same speed. Okay, and it's actually a pretty big moth. But dragonflies fly differently. Differently meaning the muscle structure of their wings is different than that of other flying insects. Most insects, their wings are attached, they have a, it's not really a muscle, let's call it a tendon, that attaches the end of the wing inside their body to their abdomen. Then their abdomen comes up, it's out here, and so the outside of their abdomen is attached to the next part of their wing. And then their wing is out here. In order for them to fly like a butterfly, what they have to do is they have to compress their bodies this way, and then they have to stretch their bodies out that way. They have a muscle that runs the length of their abdomen. And that's what happens, is that when they compress that muscle, it causes their abdomen to bulge up in the middle. It causes the wing to go up. Then they stretch that back out, stretches out the abdomen gets smaller, pulls their wings down. If you ever watch a slow motion video of a butterfly flying, it's really obvious what's going on. You see their body is just kind of doing this. And their wings are flapping, they're moving up and down. The dragonfly's not like that. The dragonfly has, each wing is connected with two muscles. One to pull it down, one to pull it back up. They can fly, they can flap each wing completely independent of the others. So as their body remains straight, their abdomen doesn't have to flex or move around, their wings are pumping up and down. This one could be doing this, whatever. All four wings flying independently of each other. And it is because of the way that the muscles are. These are attached, there's more muscles underneath. It's kind of hard to see. You have to dissect one to find out the muscles. But the idea is that they're able to control these muscles wherever they are thinking about going. The muscles are reacting, just like we think of walking in a straight line, balance, all of those things we don't have to think about. Well, all of that flapping around causes heat and an increase for the need of oxygen. They got that covered. There are holes here, here, and there. As the wings flap up and down, these act as bellows, pumping oxygen into their body, as well as exhaling carbon dioxide. It's cooling off their muscles at the same time. So they can sustain flight, high-speed flight, their acrobatics or aerobatics flight for quite a while without overheating. If you ever see a dragonfly sitting and it has its abdomen tipped up into the sky, it's doing one of two things. It's cooling off, but they can also be warming up if they're exposing the underside. So their wings attached differently than other insects. The structure that I was talking about before, it's hard to explain. This paper is essentially the same weight all the way across. It doesn't really flap very well. But if I were to put a paper clip on this end, put some weight on this end, and do this paper would now start to do that. And it has to do with that weight. Every single dragonfly has a spot on his wing, or her wing, the pterostigma. That's what that is. It is a counterweight. It is a heavier part of the wing. So that when they are flapping their wing really fast, their wing itself doesn't start to vibrate. Because of throwing essentially this heavy weight out, it keeps the wing straight. So that structure right there is what enables a dragonfly to flap its wings so fast without having them crumble apart. These tubes are heavier because they are more rigid. These tubes aren't going so much in a straight line. This is a fluttering part of the wing. So as the wing comes down, this section in the back here can bend. The front part of the wing won't bend. The front part of the wing remains very, very rigidly flat. The back part doesn't. If you think about a sailboat, it has a mast, and the sail comes out. This part back here moves around, but the part right by the mast doesn't. Same reason.
So the way it flexes, but the dragonfly can't, like, work it.
They can bend the tip down. Okay, now, the way they do that is just by pulling on it hard. It's not a conscious thing, I want to curl the tips down. So they don't have muscles within the wings. The shape over the wings themselves, they're not smooth. They're actually hairy, quite hairy, and it has to do with, it controls turbulence. But no, they can't so much like a bird can. It's different. How many eyes? How many eyes do you see? Okay, first of all, these eyes here are compound eyes, but each is an eye. Each one has 30,000 different lenses. But this is an eye, that's an eye. How many eyes do you see? And actually the question is, how many eyes does a dragonfly have? Well, actually, they have 5. They have 5 eyes. The compound eyes of 30,000 lenses allows them to see in just about every direction. The only place that they cannot see is directly behind them. The only reason they can't see directly behind them is they have a body. It's in the way. But they can see straight up, straight down, off to the side. They can rotate their head about 150 degrees in both directions. So they can see everywhere. But let's say that you're flying along. You're flying 35 miles an hour, which is about 200, 300 miles an hour for us. And you do a backflip and you fly up into the air and you turn around backward and then you start flying backward, left and right. Which way is up? You lose track. Well, dragonflies have got that covered too. They have 3 more eyes. These are simple eyes, single lens eyes. The only thing they do is detect light. They can tell where the horizon is. So they always know their orientation. Whether they're this way, this way, this way, they know. That is how they know. That's the only thing that those eyes do. There they are. So dragonflies have really large eyes. They have the largest eyes proportionally to their body of any insect. They can see all around. They have extra eyes to keep them oriented up and down. They also have what's known as selective vision. What that is it allows them to single out their prey. Right? So, keep watching me. If I walk over here, no matter where I walk, you're able to follow me. You don't get confused when I duck down behind all the other people. Because you're focused on me. The dragonfly does the same thing. Once it picks out its prey, it will ignore all other information. Even though it has 30,000, 60,000 eyes, plus 3 others, it can still focus on one insect. Since it can fly faster and more agile than the insect that it's going after, I guarantee you it's going to eat. 95% effective makes them the most effective predator in the air. Not the most effective predator on the planet, though. There is one other. Guesses. What is the... Nope. That is about 60. Any other guesses? Sorry? Nope. That is one of the reasons why birds like flock, is because it's hard for a predator, like a hawk, a falcon, eagle, to pick out one of them. They don't have the selective vision. If there is one bird by itself, yeah, they're focused on that, no problem. But you throw in a whole bunch of other information, they kind of get confused. Not these guys. There is another predator that is more effective than the dragonfly.
Spider.
No. Seahorse. Seahorse. Seahorse is about 98% effective. Yes, it just sits there, waits for stuff to come by. It sucks water in with its prey. So it's not really hunting, but it is more effective than a dragonfly. But other than that, dragonflies are the most effective predator on the planet. So, unchanged for 300 million years, dragonflies, blah, blah, blah. I see you. This is a blue corporal that has this head. And that's the only reason I wanted you to see this picture, is that you can see, because his mouth now is right there. So aside from having these really big eyes that are on top of their head, they can see everywhere. They can also spin their heads almost all the way around. I'm not going to go through all of these, because by the time this year the season comes around, you probably won't remember. This dragonfly here is the one that I wanted to stop on. You remember the picture before where they were mating and there was a dragonfly coming up behind? That's the dragonfly that was coming up behind. You can see his wings are pretty tattered. Called him Captain Jack. He was around for quite a while. What you can't tell is that one of his eyes is messed up. Okay? But yet he was still the head dragonfly of the pond. He was chasing off everybody. It didn't matter who was coming by. He was the badass. So missing an eye, he was missing an eye, he was missing a leg, his wings were almost completely gone, yet he was still able to do everything that he would have been able to do, and still was the dominant male in the pond. There. So I'll leave you with this. The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all true art and all science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. His eyes are closed. So I hope that you will go out, and when the weather gets better, obviously, and stand in amazement and watch these dragonflies. Pretty much every single time that I've gone out, I will stand there or squat or lay, whatever, just like this. And a dragonfly will land on my finger. Christine can attest to that. We have several pictures of me doing that. And all you have to do is be still. You know, it's doesn't really matter what species it is. You know, it's nice to know that. It's one of those things that, okay, yeah, I can't help it, but sometimes it's better just to appreciate things. Don't worry about what it's doing. Don't worry about any of the technical, biological, any of that kind of stuff. Just appreciate for what they are. You know, take time to enjoy where you are, what you're doing, and just be at peace. I guarantee you, the dragonfly will come up to you. They always do. They always have. Thank you.